to. And in fact, they have been quite wonderful at that. There's all these mice have personalities that are unique, but there's one in particular that's smaller than the others and speaks in your ear, and he's very friendly. And my son has been enriched, and his spirit has been enhanced by these mice, as has mine in a certain way. I've written about 40 poems about mice.
How long have you had these particular mice?
These mice have been around for about 2 years. There's one, in fact, that seems to have a cancer of some kind. He's very sick. And I think about him, I think there's nothing I can do for him. And I think that the kind of feeling that I have for that mouse is very similar to the kind of feeling I have to lovers. They're all crazy and there's nothing I can do about it.
Does your son live here with you?
Yeah, he's here about 5 days a week or 7 days a week. He's around a whole lot. He's around his mother a whole lot also. His mother works, so and I am lucky enough to be retired, so I have the bulk of the time with my son.
I take it you're divorced?
Yeah. But, you know, it's very amiable. I hardly notice the legality of my love life or the progeny I produce. It's sort of, it gives too much credit to the state to acknowledge the legality or lack of legality in one's amorous relationships or the consequences of them.
How long were you married for?
Oh, well, actually, we're still legally married.
Oh, it's just separated.
Yeah, but I don't even know whether we're actually legally separated. I've never really thought about it.
Well, you decided to just go separate ways?
Well, I think our relationship had more of the character of an affair in certain ways, but a good affair, a very good and a very nurturing affair. I wouldn't say we go our separate ways because we see each other about 3 or 4 times a week. I just spent a couple of hours with her today. Is that my separate way?
Yeah. So in other words, it's the kind of relationship that Sartre had with Simone de Beauvoir, where they lived apart and rendezvoused.
Well, I don't rendezvous with my ex anymore. But you know, the thing that happens with sex is that it ultimately either becomes the pretext for a war or for friendship. And the way that things seem to be going is toward amicability and a certain kind of appreciation that we both have for each other, a measured appreciation. But I think all appreciation of other people should be measured. There are very few of us that deserve the adorations of popular music or things like that.
Does she have another man in her life?
Yeah, a good friend of mine.
A good friend of yours?
Yes, in fact, we've spent an awful lot of time here playing, making music. He directed many of my plays. He starred in quite a few of my plays.
And there was never any resentment on your part that your wife was gravitating toward your friend?
Well, that only happened after he asked me in a very clear way. You know, he asked me, am I still interested in him?
Oh.
I mean, you know, this was a very fair and moral operation. I consider him my best advocate. I feel I'm lucky he's around.
Oh, for what reason?
Because he's a very moral, kind, and very decent person. So he will always inspire my ex to act in the most in the most ethical way. He will be a good influence on her, and therefore he will be a good influence on my relation with her and my son's relation with me and her.
But you were legally married to her.
Well, of course.
So, in other words,
For tax purposes, of course.
They could not remarry unless you officially divorced her.
I'm sure that's one of the reasons why my friend is around.
Aha, I know, I was starting to see. And you have a woman in your life now.
I can't deny it.
Yeah. What's her name?
Pat.
Pat. You want to say anything about her?
Oh, I spent a very pleasant morning with her on my way to my ex. I spent a very pleasant morning with Pat. What shall I say about Pat? She's from Brooklyn. She's approximately my age, which is always a certain kind of natural deference to questions like that. I enjoy her company. I think, but you know, but then you could also say I've enjoyed a lot of women's company.
Do you have other women in your life besides Pat?
No.
Right now?
No, I tend to be, if I wanted to, I would, but I tend to be naturally monogamous. I think it's a preferable state because one can achieve a lot more intimacy and trust and moral growth through a very deep focus on one woman than if one is wandering around with a lot of them. Also, if I had more than one woman, I would have to talk very slowly because I would have to remember to keep their names straight.
Right. So then, if you've had a lot of women in your life and you're always monogamous, then you must have had many short-term relationships.
No, as a matter of fact, most of them have either lasted, they seem to last between a year and 4 years. I've just lived a long time.
Yeah.
Although I have to admit that at certain points in my life I've been not promiscuous. I haven't been promiscuous in decades. The last time I was promiscuous was when I was 19 years old. And I think everybody with a constant erection has at least one reason to be promiscuous. And I was. But by the time I was 20, I was absolutely convinced that the character of women was the most important thing, the real treasure, the real fare in the feast of love. And although occasionally I've relapsed from that, there have been periods in my life where I've gone for years, as a matter of fact, with 3 or 4 women at the same time. But I'd consider those periods a lot less interesting than the ones where I was with one woman.
Now, if the bulk of your relationships last between 1 and 4 years, what is it about the nature of those relationships that don't allow them to go beyond 4 years?
Well, they're all different, and I think a man is always very different with each woman, even virginal, you might say, because a man is spiritually, and I think this is equally true for all people, they're like amoebas. They grow in certain ways. They have a fluidity of spirit that you don't see in the recalcitrant physical qualities of human beings.
But as if
in some situations, they have gone on. There was one that lasted for about 10 years, and there are certain of them that, with women that I was with, for example, as lovers in my 20s and their 20s, I've become very good friends with them. So could I really say that anything ended? I mean, I've got large correspondences with old girlfriends, and essentially those kind of relationships, what happened is that sex led to a wonderful exchange of letters. So it's hard to say really. I would say this, that any woman whom I've cared for and who's cared for me, I don't think that anything ever ended. I don't believe there's a woman out there whom I've been with, even casually, that has forgotten me, nor have I forgotten them. And if they have and I haven't, it wasn't worth being there in the first place. Why would we do it?
So you're a contradiction then to the proverb that friendships often end in love, but love and friendship never. That isn't the case with you. Your loves have resolved into friendships and you keep them going?
Yeah, and I think that friendship is the basis of love, because what lasts in love is only loyalty and stalwartness and true faith and admiration and qualities that have very little to do with romance or carnality. I've been with women whom I've only noticed are stunningly beautiful because other men have noticed them. I forget. If you're with the most attractive woman for 2 months, you become accustomed to that. And I think part of the reason is because it's not important. I mean, how important in life in general is a promise? And all beauty is a promise that something extraordinary will happen to you, like art.
Do you think men are attracted to beautiful women because it's a positive reflection upon them that they could command the interest of?
Well, I can't speak for all men. Unfortunately, I haven't been an elected ambassador of an army of interchangeable men, so I haven't had an opportunity to take up that role. I could only speak for myself if I'm lucky, and sometimes I can't even do that. But if I were even to try to speak for myself, I would say that there's nothing at all, if you're knowledgeable about women, it's the easiest thing in the world to sleep with a beautiful woman. If you understand them, that they usually feel as if they're not appreciated for their character, and that all men want to do is to sleep with them. You simply appeal to the things that they think are valuable, and then before you know it, you're in bed with them. A woman has to know that she wants to sleep with you. It's like fishing. You put out this very highly colored, shimmering, attractive thing that floats in the water, and the fish come up and they make up their minds to bite. You can see this with trout or pike or anything like that. You can see it with women also. They make up their minds that they want you, and then everything is easy. And a lot of men who have no appreciation of women or understanding are aggressive when they shouldn't be aggressive at all. They should just try to run away slowly.
How many times in your life have you felt the pain of unrequited love?
Unrequited love? Never.
Never?
Never.
Oh, that makes you a lucky man.
I don't know. There are certain kinds of miseries that I'm ignorant of, and I don't think ignorance is ever a virtue.
You told me earlier this evening that you wrote a number of novels earlier in your life.
He's tired of my love life. It's so boring. He can't. He asked me, everything except, how do I fuck him? How do I fuck? Do I take him like this? Do I take him like that? But he's had enough.
Well,
Okay.
He was hoping to get into sublimation now.
Yeah, I wanted to see if you talked about your sex life in your novels.
Boy, in my novels, do I talk about my sex life? In a coded way. Anybody who writes a novel is always writing some kind of coded confessional that he codes because he doesn't want to be arrested, but he also has a shameless desire to confess all, and he also believes that his experience, or he also believes that his experience is shared by many, many people, because otherwise they wouldn't appreciate the experience. So they give people, a novelist will always give a person something that is not entirely alien to them. It may be a few steps beyond their conscious perception of reality, but it can only be a few steps beyond it, or they won't get it, they won't feel it, they won't be affected by it. So you've got to find in yourself something that is ultimately reductive in a certain way, something that's will strike other people who are not you, whose experience has been, at least on the surface, very different than your own. And that's what you look for, I think, in general in the arts. So, to answer your question, do I write about my love life in my novels? I've recently written one novel called Love Monster, which is, in some ways, a very thinly disguised version of an affair I had about 4 years ago now. But generally speaking, I don't. What I'm concerned with is, in novels or in any kind of art, is producing a kind of experience that I hope is going to be of value to people. I'm not in therapy. I don't have to tell people about myself. I don't even know. I don't think I should be that important to anybody. What I'm offering is an opportunity for people to discover themselves, not to discover me. I can remember when I took LSD back in the 60s. Is anybody listening? And everybody would talk about the drug. Okay, the drug. The drug makes you think this, makes you think that, as if the drug were a kind of as if there were coded experiences that the drug gave you, okay, whether it was marijuana or LSD or hash, whatever it was, coke, and that was never true. All the drugs ever were poison that, with a kind of a venomous style, the poison ripped away the armor of the soul, so you got to see aspects of yourself that you would not normally see. And you could have the same experience from a whole lot of other things. I think love produces that kind of ripping away of armor if you're prepared for that kind of self-confrontation or the confrontation of another human being. That's what I think is valuable in art for the reader, for the viewer, for whomever. They need, I don't need it, they need to be looking into a mirror like Theseus staring at Medusa through a mirror so he wouldn't turn to stone. They need that. Otherwise there would be no reason for art. It's not important at all that anybody even notices that I do it.
Well, did the woman who's the protagonist in this novel know that you wrote a book about your affair with her?
Well, I will say this, that when any woman takes up with a man who's an artist, they always are in jeopardy. I would say this, that I've written a lot of poetry to women, some of which is complaining to them about their imperfections. I think it's always flattering to a woman that anybody cares enough about them. Their great fear is the indifference in men. It's not contempt, because contempt is a kind of attention. I would think that this lady, Ilana, her name is, would be rather pleased by this novel. Mm-hmm. Even though it certainly isn't presenting her all the time in the most favorable light. Because love does that. Caring about people does that. You don't want to forget them. They meant something to you. You continue to process them. They are with you. The people whom you love, the people whom you really cared about are with you. Always. They nurture you even when they're not around. Because you've known them. You've known what their soul is like. You've known what their presence is like. Now, where can you get that? But from a woman or a very close friend or some kind of spiritual experience. Those are the things that are important. I would hope that she would be very flattered, because as we all know, there are so many things in this world that seem to be the language of intimacy, but are only an emulation of intimacy. And that is the death of life itself when that happens. When a love affair becomes a ceremony of some kind.
Would you describe yourself as a great lover?
No, I wouldn't describe myself as a great anything. Part of maturity, I think, comes from knowing that there are always people who are better than you. For example, when Isaac Singer died, I said to myself, as a kind of an infantile joke, well, now I know that at least there's one person in the world that I know who's a better writer than I am. He's not around anymore. Because he was better. But, that competitive stuff is so silly and so infantile. I just want to be the best I can be. I mean, I don't even know what the best lover is in a certain way. I would say this, that my goal as a lover is always to get to be intimate with the soul of the woman whom I love.
Never for lust?
Lust is a function of that. And it's so much more powerful and so much more rich when what you really want is a spirit, but it's being expressed in a language which is only on a superficial level lust. What an incredible surprise or revelation a woman can have when some experience that maybe for her has become sterile or meaningless or even contemptible suddenly becomes a language of intimacy. People don't know a whole lot. From what women have told me, they complain that men don't have a great capacity for intimacy. They complain about that all the time. I have been told by a lot of women that I have this. I certainly am not going to compare myself to any other man. How would I know? And it doesn't matter. I mean, each of us, like you, ultimately we walk the earth alone on a certain level. Our connections with the spiritual world, with God, with all these things, create a certain kind of solarity in us. We have no need to compete with anybody. They all have their own journeys. They all have their own treks.
Does your son ask you questions about why you and his mother aren't together?
No, he never asked. Children accept situations. They will complain about certain situations, like I couldn't come to his birthday party, although oddly enough now I can because I just got a cancellation for something tomorrow. But I can't come to the birthday party for his friends that his mother is throwing him, but I was almost going to come. But I am coming to his real birthday party, which his mother and I are throwing for him, the three of us. My son, my ex, and I said, because we're on very amicable terms, Joe. It's not as if we're about to kill each other. I just spent a couple of very pleasant hours with her,
But
and I really do like her.
Your son spends most of his time with you, so in effect,
At school,
you have the majority of the burden of raising him.
it's no burden. It's fun.
Well, the challenge, I should say.
It's fun. It's fun.
Fun.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Is that because you're home more than she is, that your son is with you most of the time?
Yeah, I have the flexibility. I've got the time. I actually like it. I like parenting. Parenting is a way of passing on through the prism of light that's the present or yourself something into the future. You give a message to the future that is so enigmatic and obscure that you don't even understand it yourself. And that's what children are. They're these magical and miraculous messages that you don't understand. What are you saying? What is it that you want the 21st century to know?
Do you make a conscious effort to try and not make the mistakes that you feel maybe your father made in raising you with your son?
Yeah, I'm pay a lot more attention to my son than my father did to me. And I don't know whether that's right, though. I don't even know whether it was a mistake. Because you can only judge a mistake on the basis of the complicity or the ability to rise to the challenge of the other person. How one acts is almost a kind of neutrality. I mean, my father left me to develop. I could look at it as neglect, although actually I sought him out and he was there when I sought him out. But I would also have to say that if I could also look on the neglect as a kind of a freedom to grow that I really took advantage of. I mean, he didn't get in my way. So how am I to judge him? Had he made mistakes? I don't know.
Well, only in your heart you would come to some kind of judgment as to how he was as a father.
Well, I think people are on a continual psychic elevator. They go down to the level of vanity and egoism, and they go up to the level of charity and generosity. And they're always on that elevator, and the elevator is always moving. And I don't think there's any absolute judgment that I could make along that line. I'd say my father took care of me, he sent me to college, he was my model for manhood, and he was a good model. I couldn't ask for much more, really. I could have asked for a lot more. I mean, but a lot of what he didn't do, I did for myself. I essentially learned how to play the piano myself. A lot of what I did myself was, a lot of what I did had been the kind of things that he had sort of almost casually mentioned as things he did, like the music or writing or things like that. What I pass on to my child is very different because of who I am. I'm looking at this piano now, and there's a piece of Bartok a few pieces of Bartok that my 5-year-old son is playing. And I'm thinking, I only wish that I started the piano at 5. And I'm teaching him Hebrew, and I'm teaching him Swedish, and that's because his mother is of Swedish descent. And I'm definitely an oppressive kind of person that he will have to get rid of. No question about it. He's going to come out after me. But after the fury has settled at all the terrible things that I did, like try to make him work hard and all of that, have good habits. And I don't even know whether that's right. That could be an enormous mistake. Maybe he would have to discover that. But after it's all over, I hope that he will see that I was for him, which is how I feel about my father.
Your involvement with the video, is this a talent you developed yourself, or did you get formal training?
No, I have no formal training at all. The only training I have in video was a class in art and sculpture I took in college about 31 years ago, which taught me about light and composition and essentially the problems of composing, and I'm speaking of how to organize our visual structure and how to use light and questions of light and shadow. All these things were taken up in quite marvelous form by a teacher by the name of Mr. Eisenberg.